The morning sun seeped through the blinds, casting long shadows across the bedroom. Ethan Coleman rubbed his temples, trying to chase away the dull throbbing in his head. Another sleepless night. Another morning waking up in an empty bed. His wife, Rachel, had left the house early, just like she had been doing for months now. He had always believed their marriage was unbreakable. They had 3 kids together, a life they built from scratch. But everything changed the night Rachel sat across from him at the dining table, nervously twisting the ring on her finger. "I've been thinking, Ethan," she had said, voice hesitant. "What if we tried an open marriage?" Ethan had laughed, waiting for the punchline. But the way she avoided his gaze made his stomach churn. "You're serious?" he had asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I love you," she had assured him, "but I feel like there's something missing. I don't want to leave you. I just want to explore. It wouldn't change what we have, but it did change everything." Ethan felt like he had been sucker punched. The woman he devoted his life to, the mother of his children, was asking for permission to sleep with another man. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't just an idea. She had already decided. And that was the moment Ethan knew his marriage was over. He refused her request without hesitation. If she wanted to be with someone else, she could, but not while still calling herself his wife. Rachel had nodded, disappointed but not surprised. And just like that, she stopped pretending. She started staying out later, returning home smelling of expensive cologne that wasn't his. She didn't even bother to hide it. Now, Ethan stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at his reflection. His once thick hair had started thinning. His body was no longer as fit as it used to be. Maybe that was why she had strayed. Maybe he wasn't enough anymore. He gritted his teeth and grabbed the clippers. He wasn't going to let this destroy him. He shaved his head clean, wiped away the last trace of the man who had blindly trusted his wife, and stepped into the shower. Today was the beginning of something new. Ethan felt an unfamiliar sense of control as he stepped out of the bathroom, freshly shaved and determined. If Rachel had already checked out of their marriage, then so would he, but on his terms. He spent the next few hours methodically unraveling the life they had built together. He logged into their joint bank account, transferring his half into a new account she didn't have access to. He canceled their shared credit cards and phone plans, ensuring she wouldn't benefit from his hard-earned money anymore. Then he walked into the Caterpillar dealership, where he had worked for the past 10 years, and quit on the spot. "Are you sure about this, Ethan?" his boss had asked, shocked. "Positive," Ethan replied. There was no way he was going to continue grinding himself into the ground just to fund Rachel's double life. On the drive home, he felt the first sliver of relief in weeks. No more coming home to a house that felt like a battlefield. No more lying awake, wondering where Rachel was. He was done waiting for a woman who had already left. But he knew he couldn't handle this alone. He needed someone who understood what it meant to be a man of principle. So he drove out of town to his grandfather, Max, the one man whose advice he could trust. Max was a man of the old world, a rancher who built his life on sweat, hard work, and unwavering loyalty. He had no patience for betrayal, and Ethan knew exactly what his grandfather's reaction would be. When Ethan arrived, Max was sitting on the porch, sipping black coffee from a metal mug. He raised an eyebrow at his grandson's shaved head. "What the hell happened to your hair?" Ethan smirked, rubbing his hand over his scalp. Figured it was time for a fresh start. Max's expression darkened as Ethan sat down and laid out everything: the open marriage proposal, the infidelity, and his decision to leave it all behind. His grandfather's hand clenched into a fist on the table. "Damn shame," he muttered. "Women like that don't deserve good men. What's your plan?" "I want out," Ethan said firmly. "I'm going to sell the house and stay here with the kids. I won't be funding her little affair." Max nodded approvingly. "Smart boy, but she's not going to let you off that easy. She's going to want money, custody, the whole damn package." Ethan knew that all too well. Rachel wasn't just going to walk away without taking as much as she could. Just then, a familiar pickup truck pulled into the driveway. Bill Wesley, one of Max's oldest friends and a retired district court judge, stepped out. "Max, what's so damn urgent?" Bill asked as he walked up the steps. Max grinned. "We got a situation, Bill. Thought you might have some insight." Ethan explained everything again, and Bill sighed, shaking his head. "She's going to take you to the cleaners, kid. That's just how the system works. You'll pay for her to live comfortably while she's with her new man." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Not if I can help it." Bill studied him carefully. "You emptied the accounts, right? Quit your job." Ethan nodded. Bill exhaled, rubbing his chin. "Smart. Courts look at income to determine support payments. With no job, they'll base it on what you make now, which is nothing." Max grinned. "I got a job for him. He'll work on the ranch." "Under the table." Bill chuckled. "Well played, gentlemen. Well played." For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt like he had the upper hand. Rachel thought she had him trapped. She had no idea who she was messing with. Ethan left his grandfather's house with a renewed sense of purpose. He had a plan now, a way to fight back against Rachel's betrayal and the legal system that favored her. But the real battle hadn't started yet. He drove back home, his mind already strategizing his next move. The house. He needed to control the situation before Rachel tried to manipulate things in her favor. Rachel hadn't come home the night before, and Ethan took full advantage of her absence. He found their mortgage documents and stopped making payments. If the bank foreclosed, Rachel couldn't use the house against him. It wasn't just a home anymore. It was a financial weapon, and he refused to let her wield it. He made sure his name was the primary one on all the utilities, then changed the locks. It wasn't a matter of keeping Rachel out forever. She still had a legal right to the house. But this was his line in the sand. If she wanted to come back, she'd have to face him first. By 7 p.m., Rachel finally arrived, looking irritated instead of guilty. She walked in, barely acknowledging him before her eyes widened in shock. "What the hell did you do to your hair?" she blurted out. Ethan didn't flinch. "Figured it was time for a change." Rachel rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic." She dropped her purse on the table. "We need to talk." Ethan leaned against the counter, arms crossed, silent. Rachel hesitated for a second before sighing. "Look, I know last night was a lot. I never meant to hurt you." Ethan scoffed. You mean the part where you've been sleeping with another man for a year? Or the part where you thought I'd be cool with it? Rachel's jaw tightened. I didn't plan this, Ethan. It just happened. I was trying to help him, and feelings developed. Help him? Ethan repeated with a laugh. You were helping him all right. Right into bed? Rachel's frustration flared. You don't get it? This doesn't have to change anything between us. I still love you. You love me? Ethan's voice was dangerously calm. That's funny, because I don't recall love involving sneaking off to another man's house while your husband is busting his ass to provide for you. Rachel swallowed, shifting her stance. It doesn't have to be over, Ethan. Oh, it's over. Rachel went pale. You're serious? Dead serious, Ethan confirmed. And don't think you're taking the kids. You walked out on our marriage. Hell, you walked out on them too. Rachel's eyes flashed with anger. You don't get to decide that. The court will. Ethan smirked. Good luck proving you're the stable parent when you're shacking up with some sleazy lawyer who can't even keep his own marriage together. Rachel stepped closer, her voice turning desperate. Ethan, please. Let's just take a break. Think about the kids. We don't have to rush into anything. Ethan's expression hardened. I already have. We're done, Rachel. And I suggest you start figuring out how you're going to live without my support. Rachel stood there, stunned. For the first time, she realized that Ethan wasn't the same man she had walked all over for the past year. He wasn't begging. He wasn't crying. He was done. And that scared her more than anything. Rachel stood frozen in the living room, her face shifting from shock to desperation as the weight of Ethan's words sank in. For the first time, she saw something in her husband that she had never considered before. A man who wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. But Rachel wasn't one to give up easily. You can't just throw away everything we built together, Ethan, she snapped, folding her arms as if asserting dominance. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. I didn't throw it away, Rachel. You did. The moment you crawled into bed with him. Her lips parted as if she was about to argue, but Ethan wasn't finished. You want to play this game? Fine. But don't think for a second that you're going to waltz in here and pretend we can be one big happy family while you're screwing around. He stepped forward, his towering frame forcing Rachel to take an instinctive step back. The bank is foreclosing the house, he said, watching her expression carefully. Rachel's eyes widened in panic. What? That's our home. You can't do that? Already did, Ethan said coldly. I stopped making payments. It's not ours anymore. And guess what? You won't get a single dime out of it. Rachel's face turned red with rage and disbelief. You bastard! I have rights. Ethan leaned in slightly, his voice calm but filled with steel. Yeah, and I have receipts. You want to fight? Let's go. But I promise you, Rachel, you'll lose. Rachel tried to regain her composure, forcing fake tears to well in her eyes. Ethan, please, I never wanted to hurt you. Ethan saw through her act immediately. You're not crying because you regret cheating. You're crying because you're losing control. Rachel's breath hitched, her mask slipping for a fraction of a second. You thought you had me backed into a corner, didn't you? Ethan continued. You thought I'd be too broken to fight back, that I'd beg you to stay while you carried on your affair. But here's the thing, Rachel. I've already decided what happens next. Rachel clenched her fists. And what exactly is that? Ethan smirked. You're gonna leave. You're gonna pack your things, go to your boyfriend's place, and figure out what your life looks like without me paying for it. And if you even think about trying to take the kids from me, I will drag you through every court in this country until you don't have a penny left to your name. Rachel's eyes darkened. You really think a judge will side with you? The courts always favor the mother, Ethan. Ethan crossed his arms, unfazed. You sure about that? Because I've got evidence that says otherwise. Rachel froze. Ethan could see the wheels turning in her head. He wasn't bluffing, and she knew it. What do you mean? She asked cautiously. Ethan pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. Rachel's face paled as the sound of her own voice filled the room. Laughing, whispering sweet nothings, and making promises to her lover. You think I didn't know? Ethan asked. I knew long before you even admitted it. And now I have proof. Rachel looked like she might collapse. You recorded me? She whispered, her voice shaking. Ethan's smirk deepened. Consider it insurance. And if you even think about trying to screw me over in court, I'll make sure that recording lands exactly where it needs to. Rachel knew she had lost this round. Her breathing was shallow as she turned toward the stairs, knowing she needed to pack her bags before this got worse. But as she ascended, she turned back one last time. This isn't over, Ethan. Ethan watched her go, his expression unshaken. No, Rachel, he muttered under his breath. It's just beginning. Rachel stormed upstairs, rage bubbling beneath her forced composure. Her mind raced. How did Ethan turn the tables so fast? She thought he would break under the pressure of her betrayal, but instead he was standing taller than ever, more confident, more ruthless. She yanked open the closet, grabbing handfuls of clothes and shoving them into a suitcase. She had to get out of there, but not forever. Ethan was bluffing. He had to be. This is just a setback, she whispered to herself, gripping the edges of the dresser. Then, a realization hit her like a freight train. Where am I even going? Her lover, David, had promised her a future, but lately his enthusiasm had started to fade. He loved the thrill of sneaking around, but did he really want her full time? Rachel swallowed hard, doubt creeping in. She heard Ethan's footsteps downstairs, calm, controlled, unbothered. That was what enraged her the most. He should be begging her to stay, pleading for another chance. Instead, he was watching her leave like it was a business deal. She zipped up the suitcase, a plan forming. I'll go to David's, let things cool down, and then I'll come back. Ethan's just trying to scare me. He still loves me. He'll realize he can't handle life without me. Rachel took a deep breath and stepped toward the door. Ethan stood by the front door, arms crossed. He wasn't stopping her, but he wasn't helping either. He simply watched. So this is it? Rachel asked, tilting her chin up. Ethan raised an eyebrow. This is what you wanted, isn't it? Rachel huffed, rolling her eyes. No, Ethan. I wanted an open marriage. I wanted honesty. But you? You can't handle the idea that love doesn't have to be exclusive. Ethan let out a dry laugh. You wanted to screw around while keeping your cushy life intact, Rachel. Don't try to sell it as something noble. Rachel's nostrils flared. You don't understand what it's like to feel trapped, to feel invisible in your own marriage, she shot back. Ethan took a slow step forward. "You weren't trapped. You were just bored," he said coolly. "And instead of talking to me like an adult, you chose to lie, cheat, and play the victim when you got caught." Rachel's lips trembled. For the first time, she saw something in Ethan's eyes she never expected. Disgust. "I hope David is worth it," he added, stepping aside and opening the door. Rachel clenched her jaw and marched out, suitcase in hand. But as she walked toward her car, she couldn't shake the feeling that, for the first time in their marriage, Ethan had won. Ethan shut the door behind her and let out a deep breath. For months, he had been drowning in betrayal, pain, and anger. But now he felt lighter. He wasn't the one losing anything. Rachel was. She just didn't know it yet. He pulled out his phone. One last thing to do. He tapped the screen and sent a simple message. She's gone. It's time to move forward. Who was he texting? And what did moving forward really mean? Ethan smirked. Rachel thought she was playing chess. But Ethan had just checkmated her. Rachel gripped the steering wheel, knuckles turning white as she sped down the empty road. The night was eerily silent, except for the sound of her own ragged breathing. She had walked out with her head high, pretending like she was in control. But the second she was alone, the weight of reality hit her like a freight train. What the hell just happened? Her hands trembled as she pulled into David's driveway. She cut the engine and took a deep breath, bracing herself. This was her choice. This was the life she wanted. So why did it feel like she had just lost everything? Rachel rang the doorbell, her heart pounding. It took a minute, but then David finally answered. He stood in the doorway, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair messy, like he had just woken up. "Rachel? What are you doing here?" Her stomach dropped. There was no excitement in his voice, no warmth, no relief, just surprise. "I left Ethan," she said, forcing a smile. "Just like we talked about." David rubbed the back of his neck, stepping outside and pulling the door shut behind him. "You left tonight?" "Yeah." Rachel tried to laugh, hoping to lighten the mood. "I thought you'd be happy to see me." David hesitated. Then, the words that shattered everything. "Rachel, this isn't a good time." Her smile froze. "What do you mean?" I thought. "Look, I didn't think you'd actually do it." Rachel felt like she had just been punched in the gut. "Are you serious? You told me you loved me." David exhaled, looking away. "I care about you, but I never asked you to leave him." Rachel took a staggered step back, her chest tightening. "So what? You just wanted me as a side piece forever?" David's silence was all the answer she needed. Betrayal, humiliation, regret. Rachel had given up everything for this man, only to realize she had been nothing more than a fantasy to him. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Screw you, David," she whispered, turning on her heel. "Rachel!" She didn't wait, didn't look back. She threw her suitcase into the trunk, slammed the door, and peeled out of the driveway. She had nowhere to go. For the first time in her life, Rachel was completely, utterly alone. Ethan sat in the dimly lit living room, sipping his whiskey. His phone vibrated. A message from his lawyer. "Divorce papers will be delivered by morning." Ethan smirked. Rachel had played the game and lost. And now? He was going to make sure she never recovered. Rachel drove aimlessly, her mind spinning as the reality of her situation crashed down on her like a tidal wave. She had lost everything. her marriage, her family, her security. And now, David. She had given up everything for him, only to find out he never planned on being with her in the first place. "How could I be so stupid?" she muttered, gripping the steering wheel until her fingers hurt. She pulled into a motel parking lot, staring at the flickering vacancy sign. This wasn't how she imagined her new life would begin, but it was all she had left. The next day, Rachel sat on the motel bed, staring at her phone. Nothing. No messages? No missed calls? Nothing from David. But there was one thing she didn't expect. A message from Ethan. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer today." Rachel's stomach twisted. She had known a divorce was coming, but seeing it in black and white, it hit differently. She had spent years building a life with Ethan, and now it was gone in an instant. A knock on the door startled her. She opened it hesitantly, only to see a man in a suit standing there, holding an envelope. "Rachel Morgan?" She swallowed hard. "Yes?" He handed her the papers. "You've been served." Back at home, Ethan leaned back in his chair, a smirk on his face. Rachel thought she could just walk away and have everything work in her favor. Not a chance. She had chosen her affair over her family, and now she was going to pay for it. He had already met with his lawyer. Rachel would get nothing. No house, no financial support, no share of their savings. And as for the kids, he was going to make sure she never got full custody. He had witnesses, proof of her infidelity, even statements from her own friends who knew what she had done. She destroyed our marriage, Ethan thought. Then I'll destroy her life. Rachel sat at the tiny motel table, staring at the papers. Divorce, custody battle, no financial support. She was about to lose everything. Tears blurred her vision as she buried her face in her hands. What do I do now? She had thrown away a stable life for a fantasy, and now she was paying the price. And the worst part? This was only the beginning. Rachel sat in her dimly lit motel room, her mind racing as she reread the divorce papers. It all felt surreal. Just a few months ago, she had a husband, a home, and a family. Now she was staring at legal documents that made it clear. She had lost everything. The walls seemed to close in on her as the weight of her choices finally settled in. She had been so blinded by passion, by excitement, by the idea of something new, that she never thought about what she was throwing away. And David, the man she risked everything for, gone. After weeks of dodging her calls and avoiding her messages, she finally got a single text from him. "You need to stop calling me." This was never serious. It was just fun. Move on. Her stomach churned as she read the words over and over again. Just fun? The words burned into her soul. She had burned her marriage to the ground for a man who saw her as nothing more than a distraction. And now she had nothing left. Meanwhile, Ethan was thriving. After weeks of preparing his case, his lawyer had assured him he was winning full custody. Rachel had been caught lying, cheating, and abandoning her family for another man. The courts would side with the responsible parent, and Ethan had made sure that was him. Sitting in his lawyer's office, he signed the final set of documents. "It's done," his lawyer confirmed. Ethan nodded. Rachel would never take his children away. He had won. That night, Rachel sat alone, a bottle of cheap whiskey in her hand. She thought about calling Ethan. She thought about begging him to take her back. But deep down, she knew. It was too late. No apology, no excuse. Nothing she said could undo what she'd done. Tears streamed down her face as she realized. She had thrown away a good man, a good life, and a happy family for a meaningless affair. She had lost, and there was no way to fix it. Months passed. Ethan adjusted to life as a single father. It wasn't easy, but every time he saw his kids laugh, smile, and feel safe, he knew he made the right choice. Rachel had called a few times, leaving tearful voicemails. He never responded. She had made her decision, and so had he. As he tucked his kids into bed one night, his daughter looked up at him. "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" Ethan smiled. "Better than ever." Rachel was just a memory now. A painful lesson. And Ethan? He was finally free.